Hey guys, it is Rob Sacchetto again from zombieportraits.com. I'm coming to you from my studio once more, and I am working. There's another surprise. That's something you don't see very often. Anyway, I'm actually working on comics today. I've got a script here. I'm working on some new comic material that'll be out in a few months. This one is a zombie, what a shocker, again, comic book. It's for a horror anthology, and yeah, it's going to be pretty cool. It's sort of a Goodfellas meets zombies mixture, so like a gangster, kind of humorous, kind of gory, very gory. It's going to have a lot of gore in it, and yeah, it's kind of fun. So I'm working on that right now. It's just a 5-pager, but a lot of work, because comics, man. You got to be able to draw everything and anything. Angles, keep your characters all looking, the same on the model and whatnot. So yeah, a lot of work for sure. I have the utmost respect for comic book artists because having been one a few times, it just is the most amount of work as an artist that you can possibly have to do. And in the last, it's kind of strange because in the last little while. In the last few years, I think, or I don't know. You know what? Because as you get older, time just flies. It's probably longer than that. Probably like the last decade or so. I've noticed that artists have are given less acclaim in the comic genre than they used to. And to me, comics are all about the art. Obviously, the writer, the person writing the comic, has a lot to do with it. I mean, let's face it. I don't want to undercut the importance of the writer because, you don't want to keep on having the same stories over and over and over, even though we kind of do most of the time. It's the majority of the superhero fights and the reasons why they fight are the reasons good enough and yada yada yada. But I remember back in the day, early 80s to 2000s maybe, artists were given a lot of acclaim. Like you had, people kind of knew the artists that were out there, like John Byrne, Neil Adams, and Michael Golden, and Barry Windsor Smith, and these cats. These guys were in high acclaim, and if John Byrne went to another changed to a different title, people would follow him, type of thing. And you'd see you kind of look in the price guides and stuff. Not that the price or anything is a big factor, but it is of importance. You'd see Conan number 37 went up because Neil Adams did that issue, and it would say so. Neil Adams art. So that was important, and I don't think nowadays that comic is of a higher value. That one Conan the Barbarian by Marvel Comics is of a higher value, but a lot of times it doesn't say why, and it's like, well, Neil Adams did that issue. That's why it was sort of sought after, because it was important, because he did it. Same with Byrne and Terry Austin when they started doing X-Men, and virtually every book that Neil Adams and say Tom Palmer or whoever worked on for Marvel, same thing. Those books went up in price. Those were more highly sought after. The art was really important, and I always thought the art was important. But now a lot of the sort of interest and acclaim and everything is given to writers, and I'm kind of I'm a little opposed to that. Like I look at the previous catalog, and I've got one right here. Actually, this is the newest one that just came out. Oh, there goes something. Yeah, my studio's a mess. Anyway, this is a previous catalog. Basically, it's the size of a small town phone book, and this gives you an idea of what's coming out every month in comics and toys and things like that. But mostly comics, and so yeah, like tons of stuff, obviously. And then and then Marvel has its own, separate from. Marvel used to be included in this, but now they have their own separate previews catalog, so you can order stuff from them or see what's coming out, rather, or both. So yeah, and I mean, like, there's a lot of great artists now. There's a lot of great artists even now that I think deserve a lot of acclaim that maybe don't get it. Like the tide has kind of been turned to the writers, and I see like. The artist's job now for comics is incredibly hard. It's even harder than it used to be, because now you've got these movies that show superheroes with all this tactical gear and stuff, and you can't just draw a superhero's foot like it's in a sort of a sock or something. It's like, oh, it's got to be a boot now, or some kind of stylized boot with treads and striping and laces and actual tactical gear and details in the costume and all this stuff. So and then they have to depict reality even more so. Like, cars have to be real cars, and like they can't just be sort of like, oh yeah, well, that's a car, I can tell, and that's a type of car. It's not like a whatever specific type of name. But it's a vehicle, and now it's like, well, no, you gotta almost draw like what kind of car that is, the buildings and all that stuff. It's incredibly hard to do. So artists can only, I think manage like a book a month, if that, whereas in the older days you had guys like, I mean, and they were fast too. They were at it for a long time. You had guys like Kirby and Kubert, and Joe Kubert and Buscema and stuff like that, doing a lot more work, because as good as their stuff was, and it was brilliant, it didn't need to be probably as mindful of real world detail as artists have to sort of get through now, which is brutal, I think. I mean, I wouldn't want to do that, I wouldn't want to have to use all that reference and just drawing a bloody scene that, it's going to take 2 seconds to look at. Anyway, so it's hard. Basically they're down to like doing a book a month, whereas I go through previews and I'm like, wow, this writer's doing like 5 books this month, This guy's working on 5 different books for like 3 different companies or whatever, and it's like they're knocking stuff out, and the artist is kind of sitting there struggling to do this incredibly much more detailed art, and it's getting less acclaim for some reason. So I hope that's just me, and it's not a widespread thing, but it seems like it is. It seems like that's what I'm noticing, having gone through the years that I have collecting comics. I love comics. I've collected comics for decades, and I've always, like I said, I've always loved the art, and I've always thought the artists were, the most important thing. And then you had that sort of '90s boom where I think maybe that was part of the problem too, where you had guys like McFarlane and Liefeld and these other guys who, I don't want to say Jim Lee because he was so solid. It was just that, Marvel and I think even DC had guys ape Jim Lee's work so much, and Liefeld's work too, I think more, not McFarlane so much. Like, McFarlane, I never liked him as an artist. I don't really dig him as a person that much. He seems way too satisfied with his art to be a real human. Like, I've never liked his art. I always thought it was like the ugliest shit ever. And I know I'm going to get a lot of heat for that. I know from a lot of people, they're going to go, oh, McFarlane was the best fucking Spider-Man artist and blah, 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 and all this shit. You know, look back at those Spider-Man issues, man. Like, look at Mary Jane, and look at the women. Look at how he drew women and their clothes and hair, and you know, as far as him drawing Spider-Man with the revamped webs and him doing all these wicked weird poses, within the city and all that stuff. Yeah, it was okay, but everything else he did was kind of sucked. And there's a guy right now, Ryan Stegman, who I think is fantastic. He kind of like is the answer to, if McFarlane could draw well, he would be Ryan Stegman. Ryan Stegman kind of does a bit of a McFarlane-ish type art, but he looks like he has a really solid structure behind it. Whereas McFarlane kind of, to me, it was horrible. Like it's almost hard to look at, And it's not like he did a lot of Spider-Man issues anyway. It was weird. It's weird how people like kiss that guy's ass as far as like him being this best artist they've ever seen. I think he did like maybe 30 issues of Amazing Spider-Man and then maybe 12 of the Spider-Man comic that they gave him. And then he bailed. He went like he started Image with the rest of those guys, and yeah, I don't know. Like as far as a legacy goes, it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal, And like I said, you look at some of his stuff, and it's like, to me anyway, it's painful to look at. And he just seems too satisfied with how awesome he is, because I think he just bought into his own hype and the hype that everyone sort of gave him. And best artist in the world. I don't get it. Like if a guy like Alex Toth or even Kirby or Neil Adams, I'm not trying to speak for them, but I'm saying likely if they were to assess that guy's portfolio, they would probably burn him to the ground. If he got an honest okay, this is what we think of your work. That's what I'm thinking. It was a lot of bullshit detail, a lot of crazy poses and stuff, but really the drawing was horrible, in my humble opinion. So give that, and it is just that. It's my opinion. So it's not a debate. Don't feel that you need to debate me on it, because my mind is made up. I've looked at it for eons, and I've seen it, and you're not going to change my mind by trying to convince me that McFarlane's work is awesome. I'll tell you guys who I think are awesome and why, and you either see it or you don't. So it really doesn't matter. You don't have to try to convince me or say, well, what have you done and blah blah blah, all this other stuff. I don't need to hear that. If you have to lay the heat down on me, then feel free. But it's not really going to do much good. Anyway, I thought it'd be appropriate to talk about comics today because it is Wednesday, and any self-respecting nerd would know that it is comic book day today. So, that's when comics come into the comic book stores, all the new comics, and it's everyone's weekly Christmas for the comic book nerds, and I was no different. I went to the comic book store today. However, the shipment was not in, and that was unfortunate. But it's okay. I'll get my comics when I get my comics. I've got plenty of comics to read in the meantime. So, and I've got comics to do too. So, in the meantime, I'm going to, I think, cut this little tirade off. We can talk more about this. I think I'd like to talk more about this in the future, if you guys want to hear more about my thoughts on the whole comic book industry and the importance of artists and stuff. I'd like to give a shout out to a lot of really good artists that are working right now, like Mike Hawthorne and a bunch of others like Nick Bradshaw. He's an Art Adams sort of clone. But man, if you wanted someone to sort of ape your work, he does it proud. He's a very good artist. And of course, the original Art Adams, you know, it's still doing phenomenal work. And